I'll have to repeat then if it's recording now. It's 20 degrees outside and they got the air conditioning on in here. Yeah, I can feel it.
Big changes? Anything big?
No. I'll wait till everybody gets here, but yeah. But no real changes at this point. Hmm. Yeah. Hey, Matt.
Yeah, I was in the front, so I couldn't see anybody.
Oh, yeah. Hey there. Only this time. Yeah, we'll be back to Wednesday. But I was out at PAR last Wednesday and we thought we'd push it off till the PR meetings were over to see if there was any changes. Yeah. That's what it was doing to me. Yeah, I've been on PARs all day. And I've not had a problem. I don't know if it'd make a difference of rebooting the computer.
Yeah, I guess we'll try.
Uh, no, I think I have to find a power button. There we go. I restart. um, could get our commission and then get our expenses on top of that. So $216 million. One attorney's fees was $2,200 a year, never heard of before, ever. Or $2,200 an hour. $2,200 an hour. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 That model has been around a long time and nobody's ever been successful with it. Nobody. You have the limited broker out there that when you see it, that they are MLS only, it's because they are working on a flat fee of $500 and they'll put your home in the MLS. And then if you've ever had one of those transactions, you do both sides of the work and you have to deal with a seller instead of another agent. Yeah, that's been around. A lot of those discounts type brokerages have been around. None have been successful. They're successful in a market like we've had, but as soon as the market changes and it becomes a buyer's market, they don't last. They don't last. So a lot of people think that the real estate brokerage business is all profit because you just list a house, you get several $1,000s for it, and that's all there is to it. But they don't know, like any business, they don't know what's behind the scenes, what your expenses are. You know, it's kind of like the people that have a people that have a small restaurant and you see their hours, and if you've ever been in that kind of business or know that business, it's not just the 8-10 hours that they're open. It's all the work preparation, closing up, cleaning, and all of that. So we'll try one more time and then we'll
Call it a day?
no, we'll wing it.
Why are you laughing over there? I hear you chuckling there.
We didn't come all this way to wing it. For whatever reason, Linda, I always have trouble with logging into PAR from this computer. I've been on it all day long and no problem.
Yeah, I know, but I thought I shut it because you're on the wrong. Easier, really good.
How do you present your commission now? Anyone else?
I think they know about the lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, can you hear me?
They definitely have the cost, but it's not really valued.
Mm-hmm.
Walking. Need to know this.
Right. Mm-hmm.
These we forget some stands. Yeah, it's pretty much.
Other agents.
Can anybody hear us?
4% or 5% or 2% or what?
I can hear. I'm just having problems hearing sometimes when people participate in the audience.
On my end, it's just cutting in and out. And I'm in a good service spot. I hear Bob talking every so often, but I have no idea what they're talking about.
You also had a closing cost assistance in paragraph B.
Can
So the
you hear us?
Seller says, well,
on
I'll
Zoom?
pay on B, but I'm not paying on one, A.
Bernadette, can you hear us?
What is your alternative? What is your alternative if the seller is not
Give
going
a
to
thumbs
do that?
up, Bernadette, if you hear us. Thank you.
But the buyer is gonna pay your 0.5%. Okay. That's the conversation you have to have with your buyers up front. Because you could run into that when you have seller assist and buyer brokerage. And of course, the seller, I can see typically is gonna go with B and not A. Good. Okay, anyone have any other comments on that?
I know Kirsten is dual in another state. Oh, sorry. And she was mentioning bringing you forms because the way that they had talked about the buyer compensation as being this, not to exceed this. And I don't know if she brought that to your attention, if we were thinking about that, we could do that. In other words, in other words, commission is this, not to exceed this, which in case there's a gap between a 2.5% and a 3%.
Uh-huh.
I think we were talking about that. I don't remember the full
So in other words, are you talking on the buyer agency fee?
buyer agency.
So you limit as to what could be.
Right.
Well, if we have a buyer agency fee in there and your buyer agency fee is 3%
Mhm.
and the CBC is 2.5%,
Right.
then the maximum you could charge would be the 3%.
3%.
So they'd have to pay a 0.5%.
Right.
Yeah, so that kind of is the max, right?
Okay. She was
Yeah.
talking about a scale because, sometimes with the listings, we have like a multiple choice.
Yeah,
And she had mentioned a scale saying, "Oh, you'll accept a commission between this and this, not to exceed this number." I
Right.
just didn't know if we had any thoughts on that.
That has to be a specific number in there.
David is right. Yeah. In fact, I think it says that it has to be a specific number. Now, each state can be a little bit different because each state, the rules came down and then it was left up to the states to draw up your new contracts and how you're going to present it. So that's why you'll see some difference between even Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. You'll see some difference. So. So the big debate still is, and PAR is not taking a position on it, is what happens to the excess. So seller is offering 3%. The buyer has their buyer agency at 2.5%. So they can only take, the buyer's agent can only take 2.5%, correct? Now we've got a 0.5% overage that the seller is paying. So who gets that overage? The buyer. Right now, that's kind of, and there is no policy, there is no recommendation from PAR on it. So pretty much it's up to the brokerages to how to treat it, which is not a good answer from my perspective. And but anyway, how we being KW Pocono and actually KPG is that overage goes to the buyer. Now at PAR meeting, there was some pretty good debate on that, obviously. And one agent was very adamant that I have a listing agreement for X%. So the seller has agreed to pay that percentage. So in my opinion, and how I do it, is any overage comes to me because the seller agreed to pay that amount of commission. And the other way that the other thoughts are is that it should go back to the seller. It should remain with the seller. So, so there's been, and I was kind of thinking that we'd have some changes because there's a lot of talk about changes in the forms before I went out last week to PAR. And bottom line is they really don't have any changes at this point. And the reason they don't is because, or they're not doing it, I shouldn't say don't, they're just not making changes at this point because the settlement still has not been approved by the judge yet. So, and that's not going to happen until November. And then NAR is going to, NAR has their convention, and then they're going to kind of see if there's any changes before they make, and PAR said, well, there's no point in making changes now, and then we have a change in the whole rule, and we have to change them again. So the bottom line is we're not going to see changes probably till January, February of next year. Well, then it would have to go back to negotiations. So the question is, what happens if the judge doesn't approve it? And it would have to go back to negotiations on the settlement. I think everybody pretty much feels that he's going to accept it. I would certainly, unless he's going the other way and says, no, that's too much money, which probably should be a good ruling. And keep in mind that this all, and this was part of the article that I skimmed over, this was one seller, one MLS, one association of realtors, and one judge that did all this. That's how this all came about. $216 million later, is what the attorneys made, and plus their expenses of $16 million. And who was the real winner in the all the class action suits that everybody filed because everybody jumped on board? Not everybody, but people that sold their homes because that's what they put out there. They're going to split, and they'll probably all get a bag of peanuts. Because if you've ever had one of those that you responded to as a class action suit, which I did one time, I got a check for $1.76.
You invested that 100 years ago. That would
Yeah.
or something.
That's true. Okay. Anything else you're running into?
I've been including it and they've been appreciating it. That an issue for our office.
Okay, so the form that Kristen's referring to is the temporary form. It's policy changes that we got at the beginning. The only time that you needed to use that was for transactions that were started prior to August 17th. After August 17th, you don't need to use that form anymore. So, and I have told compliance is not to shoot anything back that doesn't have it, unless it was one of the prior to August 17th. So one less form that you have to use. I don't see any harm in it. Yeah. I don't see any harm in it. Anything else? So beyond that, what else you have? Any problems, concern, issues?
Got an email over the weekend that there's another lawsuit coming out. This time it's from the buy side. And that it's going to be much larger in scope. And I guess the basis of the lawsuit is that they're saying that prices were overinflated because buyers were paying basically the commission was being built into the purchase price and thereby making them having to finance more money, all without their knowledge. That's, from what I can tell, the basis of the lawsuit.
Yeah. So the sellers complained first that they were paying too much for the buyer. Now the buyer is is the buyers complaining because the price was inflated to get put their poll. And I read that too. It is just, it just opened up a Pandora's box when this first lawsuit came through and the settlement was there. And it's, you know, I can see that when growing legs also and more attorneys getting rich, and might be the same attorney. So they're just, we got a big target on our backs, real estate industry does. And it's a shame because, you know, the way we worked prior to August 17th was the way we worked for 100 years. Now somebody's got to change the rules. So I think that realtors ought to start looking at suing attorneys for what they charge. I don't think we get an attorney to take that case. Yeah, that might be a challenge. Maybe we could find somebody that's looking to retire in a couple of years. Yeah. Okay, anything else? What else you have? Any challenges with closings? Challenging with finding homes? That's still a challenge? All the above. Yeah, all the above.
Bob, it's Dawnette. Can you hear me?
Hello. Yep, we got you.
Okay, so I just hear crickets, but I've had a lot of challenges with these changes. I'm just going to be honest. It's just been very mentally exhausting. I called Robert the other day and I was crying. You know, I'm just mentally challenged, I guess, with all of the changes. And I know everyone is trying to say business is normal, but I don't really think all of the agents in the world really seem to care about the law that has changed. And it's just challenging. So to have these, like I spoke a little bit with David this morning, to have these lister, sellers, they always are complicated because they don't want to have to pay money. So now they have all these different options, which I guess is nice. But then when you sit and you talk to the buyers, they're not happy that they have to pay either. And every
wouldn't
house
expect
is
them to be.
different.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect them to be. But I think that, you know, a lot of us have used buyer agency for a number of years. And we had a minimum that we would charge a buyer.
Correct.
And we also explained to them that if the seller would not pay the minimum on our buyer agency fee, that they understood that they had to pay it if that becomes the case. And we got agreements, some of you people that used it that way, we got the buyer's agency agreement signed, and they realized that up front. And of course, then on settlement time, they realized it because they signed a buyer agency contract for it. So for some of us, it's not too totally new. And I'm looking at Kristen and Robert and some people that's been around a while. And David, have you had challenges before, and is it any different now?
You want to go first? You know, I think in the past, when we saw, what was being offered on the MLS, I think it was fairly common for things to happen in two ways. One would be that we would, add to the buyer estimated cost sheet the difference and, review that with the buyers, and they were okay with that. And there were other times when, we've looked at the client and wondered if they had enough money to close and things like that. And we just went with what was being offered on the multi-listing service. I know that sometimes I did it one way and sometimes I did it the other way. And I think that was very common, and now, before we were looking at a lot of times, 0.5%. And now we're faced with situations that are going to be more common where that number is going to be our full commission because there's going to be 0 offered from the other side or 1% offered from the other side. So it's, that's a lot of money, a lot of extra money. So I think we are going to see some more challenges with that.
Anyone else want to add to it, Robert, Kristen? She has a lot more septic problems.
Yes, okay. I know.
The thing where maybe we have you representing the buyer and maybe the home that they're interested in, maybe the seller's offering one or nothing, for example. If that is something that the buyer then can't afford, then, we move on to something else. I think what might happen is, in our market, we're not by and large dealing with a lot of wealthy folks they're buying here. The price is changing, it's going up, and that whole environment might be changing with it. But for the most part, I think the market will correct this, right? Over time, sellers are, if they're not offering something that makes a home affordable, then, free market, and it's gonna correct itself on its own. Whether prices come down as a result of it over time, or, sellers just go back to maybe offering a reasonable commission. That's just my thought.
I would tend to agree with that. The transition period is, no matter what transition we're in, there's always a painful part,
It's just been a matter
I-
of, I've never spoken about commission as much as I've talked about it now. I think the biggest change probably is my buyer consultation. I'm spending a lot more time doing the initial one.
Right.
My buyers are getting a little bit more savvy and they're asking questions while we're out looking at houses. This weekend, I showed 13 houses in 2 different markets. And the ones that got the attention of my buyer were the ones that were paying. There
Right.
was a couple that were, beneath my minimum. They were made aware of that in advance. Those houses were sitting a little longer on the market. My client thought that they'd have a little bit more leverage getting a price change, with an offer on those houses, but ultimately I decided, I'm going to go for the other. They had a perception in their mind that it'd be easier to work with someone who was easy to work with me. They thought, well, maybe that seller's just difficult, or maybe they don't have enough money, or, that was their perception. Didn't have to say a word. But
Right.
they were just very schooled when they went in on each one. And I write it down on all the sheets so they know as they go through. I have my stack of papers that they're going to see. I put all those commissions there, so it's in their face, and with the sellers, same thing. It's a longer conversation, but I'm spending a lot more time saying, I don't care what we decide, but just know that whatever you decide, this is the potential of what could happen based on that decision. And the sellers have decided they want to put their best foot forward and give their house the most attention to the most amount of buyers and not have to squabble over, if you have 3 houses in a row and one's paying this and the other 2 are paying less, or more, or commission, that makes the one house that's not paying commission more expensive. So they're just, I think I'm spending more time talking about options than I ever have before.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what we were talking about when we were doing the classes through July there.
Mhm.
We kept saying, you're going to have better and longer consultations with your buyer, so they understand what it is. And of course, that's why we want to make sure you have the CVC before you show the house, and let the buyers know that's what is being paid. I think Kristen's has a very good system there, because she's given them a copy of the listing and given what the compensation is there. And there's going to be buyers, and that's why, what are the advantages of offering cooperative compensation? And one of the main ones is right in sticking out at you in any disclosure is, if you offer compensation, cooperative compensation, you're going to get the most activity on the house. And by not offering it, you're going to be having buyers that's not going to look at your home.
And it also
and
makes it
that's-
affordable.
yeah.
Because ultimately, if you're paying broker compensation as a seller, your home is more affordable
Mhm.
to any buyer.
Right.
And that's explaining that. I'm having no problems with new people. So like, this is just it. This is how we're doing it. We're gonna
Right.
sit down. It's the ones that have been through markets with me that are now
Yeah.
questioning, well, why the change? What's happening? They want it to be status quo,
Right.
and it's not. And they're just, this is blasphemy. Like, what? What do you mean? People
Yeah.
aren't offering cooperating compensation, and so that's where the long conversations have gone with older people.
Right. And to Robert's point, I think we're still in a seller's market. We're up to, I just looked at the state averages, because I'm have a meeting on Wednesday. State averages is for time on market is 3.5 months. Once we hit 6 months, that's what's called an even market. It's not a buyer's market. It's not really a seller's market. There's 6 months supply of homes on the market. And when that goes above 6%, now it becomes a buyer's market. And some of us remember when we had 3,500 homes in Monroe County for sale. 3,500. You could go out and show 20 houses in a day and still not be able to see, or the buyer still would not see everything that's on the market. I will say that we're going to, I always have said through the years that when the market is good, realtors think it's going to be good forever. But when it's bad, they think that it's going to be bad forever. And it never is either. Real estate's no different than any other commodity, all business cycles. We're going to come back into a buyer's market. That's when you're going to see the home prices start to come down. That's when you're going to see them come down. I went through we did not call it a crash. The only real estate crash we had was in 2008. But I got in the business in 1976. And by the way, in 1976, interest rates were 7 and 8%. So that's why I keep saying we're not in high interest rates. But anyway, in 1979, the market changed from a seller's market to a buyer's market, and home prices in Monroe County fell by 50%. By 50% in a matter of a 6-month period. As a matter of fact, I remember selling a foreclosure for ESSA for $33,000 over in Shawnee. That 2 years before that, the buyer paid $127,000. So markets will change, and that's when we're going to start seeing prices come down. Not going to, the unfortunate part where we're at now, where that change is not going to be as drastic, is because the supply of homes on the market. There just is not enough inventory out there, and for the last 10 years, there has not been enough new construction built to keep up with the new families that are coming about. So that's a little more of a challenge we have. So I don't think you're going to see the drastic changes like I just told you about in 79, but I see it changing. It will change.
Sorry, somebody else.
We'll get to the Zoom next.
just with CMAs in general, are you finding that, because I'm really not finding a lot of inventory, like that is good inventory for comps
Right.
sold. Pricing of the new listings, I'm really going on the lower end of my scale. And I'm really paying a lot of attention to actives right now. Is that something that you're recommending in this market
Yes.
too?
We're getting into the market where you got to put more emphasis on your market analysis on what's on the market, what's the competition, than what you were with sold that were sold 6 months ago. Okay, on Zoom. Any questions for anybody on Zoom? Donette, did we help you at all there, or you're still?
No, I don't know. I just, I guess I'm just not able to handle the new buyers that are calling and still wanting to go the same day to see a property, but don't want to give me any information and don't want to, sign anything.
Mhm.
I have I don't know how to get to some of the buyers to understand that I need them to understand.
Anyone else having the same challenge?
No, not as of yet.
What's that?
So,
No, not yet. Nope.
or I'm get told, well, last week I was able to go see a property, but they already said they weren't working with an agent. So are they lying? Did they really go see another property, or are agents just showing them properties still without a buyer agency? So that part, it's as if the buyers don't believe what I'm saying. And I'm not making it up. Like, so, you know,
I will I will pull it up again, and then I'll have them send it out in to an email to everybody. But you can do it yourself. Go on realtor.nar or nar.realtor.
I have it. Yeah.
Are
I
you
know what
using
you're
it?
gonna say. Yeah, I use it and I show it to them. Just like I'm talking a foreign language.
Yeah.
I have it for the sellers too. So I don't know. I'm working it. I'll get through it.
Well, you
Yeah.
know, and had somebody comment this morning that the same thing, that, well, the other agents said that it wasn't necessary to sign a buyer agency contract. And I think especially if you're using a document there from NAR that talks about the lawsuit and how you have to have a buyer agency agreement signed before you tour a home, either in person or virtual, you have to have a buyer agency. And then I guess I would question is, if an agent, and this is the rules, and we follow the rules, and have ethical standards that I follow the rules. And if you have an agent that's not, I question, is that the type of agent that you want to make this larger investment in?
Mm-hmm.
They definitely are. I would tell you that there's attorneys out there that's checking. There's attorneys out there that's checking. Yes, Robin.
Yeah, I had somebody that had called in a couple weeks ago on Opportunity Time, and they wanted to go see 123 Main Street that day, and it was when all the changes had come into effect. And I told him I'd be happy to show you the property, but you need to come into the office. We have things that we need to go over. And he gave pushback, and I said, because of the new regulations, this is what we're required to do. And I got, well, I was an agent in New Jersey X amount of years ago. And basically, like, I appreciate that, but this is the reality of what we need to do. And I got hung up the phone. So it wasn't even our listing. It was a listing from another company. So why not call that listing agent? Why call here? If that's, that's what you want to do. And plus you just, to Danette, you want to show your value to your client. And if they're not willing to take the time to sit with you, then maybe they're not going to value your work and your expertise, and it may not be somebody that you want to work with.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that I think that's another practice that some of us have done through the years, and not saying, and I'm speaking for myself, not saying that I didn't do it with everybody, but I did pretty much make it a practice in the last 15, 20 years that your first appointment with me is in the office. And they say, well, why is that? Because we have documents we have to go over. We have to talk about the process and all that. And I will tell you that through the years, when I did that full presentation, and I was much more successful with those people than what I was with somebody just calling up and, I want to run out and see this house. I'm sitting in front of this house. It's your listing. Can you run out and show it? So did I lose people? Sure. Was it people that didn't want to go through that process? Sure. But you know, the transaction, I remember it clearly. Transaction was very clear to me one Saturday. I had an appointment to show homes, and I said, first meeting has to be in my office, and so we'll meet at my office. But I didn't go into the spiel of, well, I need to go over. I need to go over documents, the process, and everything. And I tell them right up front today, it's going to take about an hour at my office. And what prompted me to do that was I had the buyer that came in, and I knew it was a husband and wife. And I said, well, where's the missus? Oh, she's out in the car. We're ready to go see houses. That's all they were interested in, is going to see houses. And I didn't have my presentation at that point, but I certainly did after that, because I realized, and again, if people understand the process, you're building rapport with them when you're doing that. Now, it doesn't have to be at the office anymore. I mean, that was when it was very common to be at the office. But Kristen picks a corner in a bar, and
Bar? Or before we go to the first, I don't want to go to the office. I'm going to the first meeting there in their welcome center first, not the bar. You think it'd be that way though?
I don't know why that just popped in my head.
Alcohol.
I have a few points I wanted to point out.
Uh-huh.
I wonder if the language, the way we deliver the new rules, maybe have something to do with why the people are responding that way. Also, people are afraid of the word contract, because I know when I hear it, maybe that's my stuff, but they're like, oh, contract. And then I'm like, well, I could do a day, I could do 30 days, but then sometimes you're wondering if when you do that, they come back and they look. I have someone who's interested in looking at a home this coming weekend, but because I told them the new rules that we have to sign a contract, and I said, listen, I could do it. It doesn't have to be for like 3 months. It could be for a day. It could be for whatever. And they asked me right off the back, can we just sign a contract for a day? I want to look at a couple of homes. So I'm just pointing out all those
Sure.
three
Valid.
things that,
Yeah.
so I'm thinking the way I explained to them about the contract, maybe I could explain it differently, where they're not opposed to it and not afraid of it, as
Yeah, what I think, I think you're right on the first point. It's some of the verbiage. People don't like contracts. I would soften the contract up to, I have a buyer's agreement that we need to discuss. Or the other thing, I stay away from using the word commissions. I stay away. To a listing, to a seller, I call it a marketing fee. And I stay away from commission. To a buyer, it's a buyer's fee. You have to discuss about buyer fee. I even, I think it's even probably good to stay away from the word agency. Say, have a buyer fee agreement that we need to discuss. What are your thoughts? What's that? The same as a contract.
Like when you said, I don't usually talk about the fee, and maybe they usually bring it up to me, and maybe because I try to stay away from it, so that way, it's not, doesn't look like I'm just concerned about the fee, I guess, if that makes sense. So usually in my conversations, the person usually said, well, how much do I have to pay you, or what do you get? Because I guess I made them feel, I connected with them. I made them feel at ease about everything, I guess, sort of.
Yeah,
One thing,
what's that? Go ahead.
Yeah, you do want to disclose that, so it's upfront, and you had that conversation.
Right, like if they don't say it, then eventually I have to tell them in that conversation, but if they usually say it before I say it in that same conversation.
I think the most important thing is get the appointment. Get the appointment, get them face to face with you. So that's why, even when I said I started using, first meeting is going to be at the office, it's going to take about an hour. I don't discuss, the word I use is I've got disclosures I got to go over with you. I don't say anything about buyer's fee. I don't on the phone call. I want to get them into my office and talking to my office, because you can have a lot more rapport or build rapport with them if you get them face to face. If it's very easy for a buyer that doesn't know you at all, and you say, well, I need to decide a buyer agency, or I need to discuss my fees, and then, well, what is your fee? And, oh, I didn't know I had to pay a fee, and get all that out. Get them face to face. That's what you want to do. That's the primary thing. And I think, I've heard it so many times through the years. What's job one? Job one is get the appointment and get in front of them, right?
Mm-hmm. And also when you're discussing the consumer notice, largely on a second page, you have, before you even get to the buyer agency, you have an opportunity to discuss with the potential client all the things that you're going to be doing for them. You have a fiduciary responsibility to put their needs above your own. You're going to be doing the paperwork. You're going to be finding them houses. There's an opportunity right there to let them know you're going to be doing quite a large amount of work for them, negotiating, key person.
We have somebody on Zoom?
Yeah, let's take Michelle's and then I'll be right up. Michelle, you're muted. There you are. Thank you.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Okay. To piggyback on just what was said earlier about what you're going to be doing for the buyer. At the end of the day, price is only an issue in the absence of value. And so when you walk into a store, and I'll use Eddie Bauer, for example. If I walk into Eddie Bauer and I want something there, I'm not too concerned about the price, because for those of you who know, Eddie Bauer's stuff it doesn't rip, it doesn't fall apart. And so my point is, hey, I want to get a coat. I don't want to buy a coat for the next 10 years. Let me see which one I like. Okay. It's Eddie Bauer. It's not going to be a $25 coat. So if we're going in to buyer representation and someone, if their concern right off the bat is, do I have to pay you? Then they're not looking for value. And I don't want to do business with anyone who doesn't value what I'm offering. Because even if I get them what they ask for, they're still going to bicker about having to pay the price. So that's not my market. And I think if you have that posture, people will adapt. And yes, as Bob said, the real estate market has gone up and down, but at the end of the day, people still need a place to live. It's just a matter if they're renting or buying and how much money they have to spend.
Very true. That it's value. Good point. What's your values? Build on your values. What do you bring to the table?
I'd like to just add to what Dave said. I agree that talking about the consumer notice up front is an easy way to lead yourself into the buyer agency contract. As you're talking about all the things that they can expect from you and your duties and responsibilities to them once you become their agent. And until we enter into a buyer agency agreement, I don't have any of these responsibilities to you. And then, oh, how do I make you my agent? Well, we'll talk about that in a minute, but let's finish going through this, right? And then it just leads into an easier discussion of agents.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. Consumer notice, I do the same thing. I start with consumer notice because number one, that's what you're supposed to do. But number two, it's right at the top that it's not a contract. I'm just going to, and then you go down through that. So that does open the door and opens the conversation. And there's enough in that consumer notice that you newer folks can certainly. It's a good guide for you to go through.
And you know, it kind of reiterates, you know, what we're getting at the bottom of the consumer notice where it says, until you have a written agreement, you know, none of these things can be assumed. No confidentiality can be assumed. The responsibilities can't be assumed.
Yep. Kristen, do you have something else you want to?
In general, I don't know what they need. They come and they get it and it's like, okay, we're gonna go look at some houses today. There's some very big differences between one neighborhood and another. There's differences from one state to another, requirements for inspection, requirements for, you know, all kinds of things. You know, do we have to have a survey here? No, we don't. You know, do you have to have things brought up to code? No, you don't. Everything's negotiable. Like when I'm in my listing or my buyer consult, I have a whole, the last thing I'm talking about is the contract.
Right.
And then I'll make a copy and then we're on our way. But I have a bunch of paper and talking points that I will go through with them, talking about, you know, what to expect with their lender, how to move forward, what happens when this happens, we find the house, how are we gonna, before you put in an offer, let me do a CMA, let me see where we're at. We talk about all of that. Contract is the very last thing. We'll talk about the houses we're gonna see. Is it on a septic? Do you have to pay for that? Is it on a sewer? You know, they know more before we even leave.
Right.
And I think that's where, I think they like that.
Yeah, and I think David really does one other thing, which I think is excellent. You have a pre-qual for $250,000. Well, now what are your expenses going to be? And David takes a blank buyer's estimated cost sheet and works through those numbers so that they can see what their costs are going to be up front. And of course, you can also now you could blend in a buyer agency fee. But that way they know, because there are so many pre-approvals out there that buyers really don't know what they're getting into. They say, well, I'm pre-approved for $400,000. Okay, yeah, now let's talk about, besides that 5% down, let's talk about the money that you need to complete settlement. And I would expect, David, is that some of them are pretty shocked. Right.
See that format, than to see it just on the listing contract, because it's not broken out on, or I'm sorry, on the sales contract, it's not broken out.
Oh, no,
And
right.
then it's broken out and they get the full.
So remember, the purpose of the buyer estimated cost sheet and the seller estimated cost sheet, right? The reason we have all these forms and disclosures and everything like this. The baseline of all this, at least in my view, is we're supposed to be working with informed consumers, right? And when we're not working with informed consumers, that's when we run into difficulties, you know, at the closing table, in the courtroom, different places, you know, that can be problematic. So, you know, the reason I like to take a buyer estimated cost sheet to like a consultation is because there's, as we know, there's a wide variety of ideas out there about what you need to buy a house. And, you know, I've heard things ranging from no problem, I got that, to
Oh, my God.
I didn't know I needed, yeah, I didn't know I needed money to buy a house, you know? I mean, you know, I'm a first-time home buyer. Why do I need money to buy a house? You know, so
And
there's that puts it in black and white. And, you know, if you see the shades go down behind their eyes, when you get to that bottom line, you know that there's more conversations needed.
Saying, the buyer that calls you at the spur of the moment that wants to go out that day, it never happens for me. I'm not jumping up to go, I'm just not doing it because I don't even know how you're going to pay for it. I don't know what type of loan you're approved for. Is it an FHA? Is it cash? Do you have your proof of funds? Do we have a pre-approval letter? There's no sense at all for me to show a house until I know, is this house going to match the loan that you have? Because we all know that they're different from one to another. Not every loan matches every house that's on the market. It's great that you want to jump up right now. I don't want to show people that I'm sitting around. You know, I don't care if I'm doing my toes. It's none of your business. I have an appointment. You know, we'll go tomorrow. Gives me a chance to get your money in order. Let's set up the appointment so we can come and meet. And if they don't like that, fantastic. Go to somebody who's going to get their license in trouble.
and waste their time.
You know. Goodness.
Yeah.
World tour for anybody. I was doing a world tour on Saturday for someone from one side of Monroe to the other. Problem with it, but that person that's sitting in my car or that's following me is pre-qualified or pre-approved. I know who their lender is. I've had conversations. When I speak to the lender, when you get really close with your lender, they tell you, don't go past this tax amount. Make sure your HOAs are not higher than this for this particular person. So, you know, unless I have that information, I'm really not doing that buyer a service by going to some random house because they happen to be here on a Sunday afternoon. They may fall in love with it and never be able to buy it.
That's right. And you know, Michelle had talked about value. All this dialogue that we're having, what is that? It's value. It's value. It's what you're bringing to the table. That's what they see. That's why you want to get them in front of you, have that conversation, have this dialogue with them, not just because, you know, the agents that just are tour guides, or they're just out there thinking that they got a warm body because they want to see a house. Those are not the folks that are going to stay in this business.
And Kristen brings up a really good point too. You know, you get a pre-approval and say it's 300,000. That's like, that basically kind of reflects the purchase price of the house, right? What we kind of is very helpful to know is what can somebody afford per month? And that's that right-hand column on the estimated cost sheet, right? And that's what people really, that's where it really comes home for people, is not it's a $300,000 house. That sounds great, but what's it going to cost me per month? And that's where the taxes and the HOA fees come in. Yeah, utilities, things like that. So, you know, to keep that in mind.
And the conversations that we're having here, I mean, we're lucky to have you guys doing this with us because we can see agents from outside of here that are coming to us with offers on our properties that the buyer can't afford. You get a pre-approval for 300,000 and you're looking at $400,000 home and you give them an offer for 300,000, but you're not doing your buyer any justice, and you're wasting your time. You're wasting a seller's time. And you know, these occasions are really helping us, I think.
Well, you're right. Yeah, the last thing you want to do is show a buyer a house that they cannot afford. because they're gonna find out sooner or later that they can't afford it. And then they're looking at a 400,000 and they only can afford 300,000. You're never gonna sell them a $300,000 house because they're gonna be comparing it to the $400,000 house that they couldn't buy. Okay. So,
But they could always wait until their $300,000 house goes up in price to 400,000, then they can get a $400,000.
yep. Anybody on Zoom land? I feel like I'm Phil Donahue.
This is great conversation.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate your input on this.
All right. Any other challenges? In the room or on Zoom?
That one that I called you about the development contingency, I haven't seen one in quite some time, and I had to call on you during the week to help me navigate that.
Yeah, and that prompted me to bring
I kind of knew it.
Yeah, it prompted me to bring these forms in case we ran out of things to talk about, which I haven't had that happen yet. But anyway, yeah, Kristen talked about a contingency settlement of other property contingency with a kick-out clause on. And I'm seeing more and more of 'cause I'm seeing more and more, but I'm also signing more and more escrow checks, escrow deposits back to the buyer because it was a sale contingent on selling their own home or their existing home, and they put in a couple of months and that didn't happen. And now the seller is saying, no, I'm not going to wait any longer, and we're going to terminate the agreement. So there are four different forms for somebody that has a home to sell or has a home they have to have settlement on. So one of the questions that you want to ask your prospective one of the things you want to ask your prospective buyers is, do you have a home to sell? And if they say yes, then you need to follow through with some other questioning is, well, do you have it on the market? Yeah, it is on the market. Do you have it under contract? Actually, we do have it under contract. Those are the questions you want to ask because that's going to set the stage of which one of these forms you're going to use. But it also lets you know that they've got a buyer or they've got a buyer that has to sell their home. And I've had one situation a couple of months ago where our agent got into a real pickle because they never asked those questions. And they never put a contingency in the agreement of sale that the buyer had to sell their house. And now settlement date's coming and she finds out that they've got to have settlement because the buyer said, well, we're going to have to push settlement back because we didn't sell our home yet. Well, there was no contingency in that agreement of sale. So there was, an agent with some sweaty palms for several days because it ended up, we worked it out, but it's a question that you want to make sure that they don't have. So we have one forum, and I was hoping that we'd be able to have our PAR website that we could pull these up for you. But one is settlement of other property contingency addendum to the agreement of sale. It's also known as SOP, not slop, but SOP. This is the best one. This out of all of them, this is the best one to use because your buyers got their house under contract, and the form says this sale is contingent upon the settlement of buyer's property at blank address. Buyer's property is under an agreement of sale with settlement to take place on or before blank. A copy of the agreement of sale for buyer's property is attached. So you want to get a copy of their agreement of sale. If settlement of buyer's property does not occur by the settlement date specified above, or if a buyer's agreement of sale is terminated, seller may terminate the agreement by written notice to buyer. All deposit monies paid on account, the purchase price will be returned to the buyer, and the agreement will become void. And then it says the buyer and seller agree to extend if necessary. So that's the best one, and that's the one that you want to make sure if you have I'll go another one. If you have a buyer that says, yeah, I have a house to sell, I've got it under contract, we're going to settle in 60 days. Don't say, well, that's good. You have to get them to sign this form also, because something could happen, as we know, something could happen to that sale. Something could happen to that sale. Any questions on that? Easy one? What's that? Yeah, yep.
Kristen was saying, generally speaking, the other agent with the buyer will not send the agreement along with that form, and that we have to receive that so we can review it and, make sure it's a valid contract.
Yeah, so if I'm representing the seller, and get a contract with this in it and the agreement of sale is not with it, I'm going to tell the other agent, or even if it's my buyer, is the seller is not going to respond to your offer until we see a signed agreement. So. Did you? Yep. Yeah, that's the only one out of the 4 that I like. What's that? Oh, did you? Oh, do you want to explain them? Go ahead.
So if it's not under contract, what's the second best form to use?
The second best is sale.
TKO?
What's that?
Is it the knockout one?
No.
Ah.
No. This next best one is an SSP-CM, known as sale and settlement of other property contingency in parens with the right to continue market addendum to the agreement of sale. Now, in most cases, I would say to the buyer, if that's the only one that they're going to accept, do you want to do it? Because they continue to me, it's not, how much of a contingency is it? It's in the seller's side, it's the seller's best one, and the buyer's worst one. So that's the sale and settlement of other property contingency with the right to continue market. And that just states agreement of sale is contingent upon the sale and settlement of property at blank. Buyer acknowledges that seller has the right to continue to offer seller property for sale to other prospective buyers. In the event seller accepts an agreement of sale for seller's property from another buyer, this agreement is terminated. So that's not like, well, the seller has to go back to the buyer, as you're going to see in the next couple. The buyer, the agreement's terminated. You notify the buyer and it's terminated. So, it's definitely a seller's, so it depends on which side you're on. It definitely is a seller's best interest. Seller has the seller's right to market the property and accept another's agreement of sale will cease upon seller's written approval of the terms and conditions of the agreement of sale for the buyers. Seller's right to continue marketing is renewed if buyer's agreement of sale is terminated. What that's saying is that the buyer gets a contract on the house. They've got it on their existing property. They've got to send it to the seller for their approval. The buyer's property is not under agreement of sale by blank, then it's terminated. So that's the best one for a seller, the worst one for a buyer.
None of these are a real advantage for the buyer.
No.
SOL,
Yeah,
that's right, the SLL form, SOL form.
Read to the contract. However, you get another offer, where you sell your house. You're out of luck.
right.
The buyer that we had agreed on.
That's the SOL part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the buyer could be like 3 days before closing on their house, and it could be.
Yeah, the reason these forms are here, obviously, is and I'm seeing more of them because homes are staying on the market a little longer. I will tell you, a few months ago, we didn't see these because if somebody had their house in New Jersey, they put it on the market, it was gone. So we didn't see it. It's when the days on market get longer, then two things from a seller standpoint is at least I got a fish on my hook. So it's a benefit for them. For the buyers, not the one we just went over, but a couple of these others are that are at least you've got something and hopefully it does work out. And that is the key word, hopefully.
He specifically said that he told his client that this was a great option because their concern was taking their house and getting it on the market and getting an offer and then wondering where they were going to go. So he told his client, this is our way to get our foot in the door because at least that way it'll bridge the gap between the sale of your house and the acquisition of the new home. But it backfired tremendously with my seller.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we were working it out. You know, we have a solution. You know, I you know, in talking with the agent, found out a lot about that seller, which seller/buyer.
Right.
And they didn't have a mortgage. And so I countered with, we'll accept every term except this particular contingency. You get a home equity line of credit or home equity loan and we'll close on
Right.
time. And that's what they're doing.
Good. So you stayed away from the
Completely
clause.
took it right out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's the best option. That this is going to be good for you.
Yeah.
It's not, you know, not good.
No, not at all. Not at all.
What was the home equity line of credit for?
Decided that to make loans, they got contingency, they would get from a house, they're going to own it, they're going to do something. And so once, and they made their offer contingent on HELOC.
Right.
So just like any other loan.
Yep.
looking at that, you know, to get to go ahead, then you'll be able to take the money from that house. But you also have to make sure that the house that they're going to be putting on is worth anything.
Right.
This agent seemed to think that the location of the house was going to be a quick sell. It's not. And we knew that. So, based on the price that they're in at.
Right. Right. Yep. Yeah, I'm doing, I work with a builder and I'm doing one that and I've done several with them this way is the buyer or the people that want to build a new house has a lot of equity in their existing home, as in this case. So they got a home equity approved, and closing is actually going to be Monday. Home equity approved, so that way they can build their new home. And I'm going to, as soon as we can, after they have their settlement or closing, I'm going to list the house, so it gives us a period of time to get the house sold before. But if it doesn't sell, they still have the home equity that's in place. That they're not out on the street and they can build their home. So if you get a seller that's in that position, it's a good avenue we get a seller that says, I'd like to build a new home, well, this is what we can do. But obviously they have to have good equity into their, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, so I guess, I guess a good point of Kristen's negotiations there, and if you have somebody that wants to, you have the buyer, you're working with the buyer, they don't have the house sold, they want to use a sale and settlement, and we'll do the kickout clause. And and as you're going to see when I explain this form, is do you have equity in your existing home that you can take a home line of credit out? That would be a better option for you than doing a sale and settlement contingency, because not a lot of sellers yet in this market want to accept it. I've had even bad markets that sellers didn't want to accept it. And in talking about the kickout clause is I don't like it, because if I have the listing and I'm on the listing side, I don't like it, because while you have the kickout clause, I'm going to explain, I keep saying kickout clause, I'll explain what it is in a second. But if you have 48 or 72-hour kickout clause there, you could lose another good buyer, because they don't know whether they can purchase it until the first buyer runs out of their kickout. So what is a kickout? What is a kickout? So this I always initially thought it reminded me of a knockout. Sale and settlement of other property contingency with right to continue marketing and time kickout clause addendum. And again, it describes the first or the property that's to be sold. On paragraph 1, buyer's property is currently listed for sale or will be listed for sale within blank days. 2, if not specified, as seller's acceptance of this agreement under an exclusive right to sell agreement with a broker of buyer's choosing who is a member of a multiple listing server. And it goes on some more. Buyer's property is or will be listed at or below blank dollars for a term of blank. Buyer acknowledges that seller has the right to continue offer seller's property for sale to other prospective buyers. If buyer receives a modified offer for the buyer's property, buyer will promptly notify seller in writing and provide a copy of the agreement sale. Within 2 days of receiving it, the seller will inform the buyer with the seller's decision. Then that paragraph gives the seller the option to review the agreement of sale on their home, their existing home, to see whether it's a modified offer or is it, it's a solid offer, is it not, which a listing agent should help them with that. If he rejects the agreement of sale of buyer's property, seller's written rejection must contain specific reasons for rejecting it within blank hours, 24 if not specified, of receiving written notice that seller rejects the agreement of the property. The buyer has a opportunity to renegotiate. So if he turns it down for a specific reason, they've got a 24 hours to renegotiate. Good luck on that one. Then if they do get another agreement, seller has 24 hours to accept the new ones. Buyer's property is not under contract for sale with the terms acceptable to seller on or before blank. They may terminate. Within 2 days of receiving proof of buyer's financial ability to proceed without the sale and settlement of the buyer's property or receiving a copy of the agreement sale, seller will inform buyer or seller at seller's sole discretion whether they accept it or not. And okay, so paragraph 7, I want to go back to that one because that's the kickout. If seller receives a bona fide offer from a different prospective buyer with terms acceptable to seller, seller will promptly notify buyer in writing of seller's receipt of that acceptable offer in seller's intent to terminate this agreement of sale. Within blank hours, 24 if not specified, of receiving written notification that seller has received a bona fide offer of terms of acceptable offer, buyer will provide written proof of buyer's financial ability to proceed without the sale and settlement of buyer's property or a copy of an agreement of sale on the property. So typically, I'm not sure what yours had in it. Typically, it's 48 or 72 hours. They've got to check it out. But the bottom line is written proof of buyer's financial ability to proceed without the sale and settlement. So that's where the question comes in. Do you have equity that can you get a home equity on your existing home? Well, if you can, then let's move forward without this contingency.
So again, this is just one more reason I'm gonna kick it back and say, give me something,
Yeah.
I need aim, I need to talk to this person. You know, and it's nice because this client then has an option to either use this or to, in addition to list their house for sale. And who knows, then you get to do both.
Right.
But the agent sends me, to me, it's just perfect. It's like, that's the stuff.
Send you a copy of their lottery ticket.
You know, love it, and the offer is very beautiful. It's good for me, and, you know, it's in essence, you know, like the line. I'm good, you know, because I'm giving a whole lot. But I need to know who's doing it and when, and I don't know if I'm doing that. You know, we can just process and all that.
And then the last form out of the four is the worst one for the seller. And that is because it's called the sale and settlement of other property contingency addendum to agreement of sale. So there's nothing in this document that says that the seller can continue to market it. It's literally taking it off the market with this addendum and for a term that could be whatever is agreed upon. Could be 60 days, could be 90 days, but the home is off the market for that period of time. So is SSP. What's that? It's the best one for the buyer, the worst one for the seller. But I would say, when I say the worst one, I don't like the one with the kick-out clause either, but that at least gives the opportunity for the house to be continued to be sold. I don't think that any listing should be active in C. I'll let Robert ask a question, then I'll explain why. No, go ahead. I'm anxious to hear your question or statement.
In your case, have you guys investigated or suggested to the buyer that they look into getting a bridge loan?
I didn't.
Okay.
Because they didn't on it. Just looked at it as an equity, you know, an equity loan based on the equity that they had. There was no mortgage. There was no bridge of one mortgage to another. You know what I mean? Now the bridge loans are, it's bridging from financing, moving from one to another. And that's not my.
So if somebody owns a home outright, which I think is the case, they wouldn't be able to get a bridge loan.
So my suggestion.
Sure. And that it sounds like you've solved the problem. Well, you're working. You got a great idea. But with a, maybe, I maybe don't even understand the complete framework of a bridge loan, but it's my understanding anyway, that a buyer can get, say, like if they own the home, even outright, maybe up to 75% of the value of that loan. And then they wouldn't have to pay on that mortgage until settlement. But part of that agreement that they have with the lender is that they will sell the house within a certain amount of time. Right, and then when the old home sells. Right, so they're really assuming the risk. They're gonna get approved for the loan, the bank's only gonna give them 75% of the fair market value of it.
So they have to have their ducks in a row before they get to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the one that I just mentioned to you about the builder, so I talked with the seller, and they had a very nice home, probably up around 525, 550, and they only owed like $60,000 on it. And so I went to Marty and I suggested, can we do a bridge loan? And he said, I think that a home equity line is going to be better because number one, you can get almost any lender to go with a home equity line. There's limited lenders that will do a bridge loan. And he said the bridge loan costs are very high. So he said you're actually better off to go with a home equity line. So that's the way that they structured it, is with a home equity line. Right. Yeah. The home equity is same as refinance. So there is a 3-day rescission. After you have settlement, you have 3 days that you can rescind that. So I have an aggressive builder. I talked to him earlier today. He said, we're cutting trees down. I said, you didn't file any liens, did you? And he said, no. I said, well, don't file any liens on it because that could kill the mortgage, the home equity. Because if they do a bring down and they see a new lien on it, that's going to make a world of difference. Yeah, they did on this one, which helps me because the appraisal came in at 500 and I'm at about 325 or 525 to list it. So, but I had already made me feel good because I had already given my analysis of 525.
He's just asking.
Yeah. No, well, I think they really are pretty much called a HELOC, right? It's a home equity line of credit. So you can go get it. You have 50% equity into your home. You can go to a bank and get a HELOC, a home equity line of credit, and then you can draw down on it any way you want.
Interested in it once you lock it in and then it becomes more.
Right.
Really, I'm thinking, wouldn't it be easier to do if you had that, like, for example, at this point, the house is literally paid off. You do a line of credit, probably faster and quicker. You only have to draw off of that for what ultimately they want to pay for the purchase price and or even the closing. But if they want to do a mortgage, ultimately, whatever's leaned against that house has to be paid off when they sell that house anyway. So.
I'm gonna put the burden on the buyer, not my seller.
Yeah, yeah. In the case that I just
Well, that would be the burden on the buyer.
Exactly. That's the.
So. Other option is the line of credit. If they have it, then I would just think for home equity, you have to go in some way that you're utilizing that for the house you're leaning against and not the value of it. So the line of credit, you use it for, you want to go to the casino and blow it all, you want to buy a car, you want to buy another piece of property, you can take it and do that.
Yeah, actually, the one that I just explained, that actually is a home equity line of credit because they're building a new home. They're only going to pay interest on the amount that's drawn. So they're not paying for the whole,
Yeah, you're only paying interest.
On what's used.
Then you lock that in, or you make it go away by selling the house.
right,
Then it's gone, there's no mortgage set on it.
Right.
So just-
Yeah, they put that, well, again, this is, I had to sell it. So the offer that was just presented to me was a home equity line of credit in the mortgage section. You didn't include any information on who, what,
Yeah.
any of that. So, and I would want to call that on there.
what's that? No, that's fine, that's fine, that's good.
Just added information in the I just gave you
Yeah,
Didn't they have a clause on,
closing. Yeah,
findable terms, section of that? Yeah. He just brought, there's a little more to what you do, but.
yeah, it's going the right direction. Okay. What else we have? Did I hear somebody had a question? I guess not. Anybody on Zoom land have a question, comment?
No, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Amazing.
So something came up within the last week that I wouldn't have. Somebody had a lender that we all know and trust is housed in this building. You want to tell the story? No, you couldn't. Gave a buyer a pre-approval letter, and part of that pre-approval letter had buyer's assistance from the county or whatever.
Right.
And the agent had just taken it at face value and thought, oh, okay, they're approved for all of this. This is their pre-approval letter. And I don't want to misrepresent anything.
Hey guys, it was me. So I wasn't the lender though, I was the agent. So I guess just, I didn't know that it was something that had to be applied for. That was not relayed to me. I assumed that, and I shouldn't